Hello and welcome to this mindfulness video on behalf of the Stuart Low Trust. My name is Katie, thank you for joining me today. So today we are going to be talking about how mindfulness can help us to cope with uncertainty and change and to actually embrace those things if we can. So just a quick recap on what mindfulness is. It's basically about being in the present moment without judgment, or to put it another way, putting the mind where the body is. And there are lots of benefits of mindfulness as we talked about in the last video. And one of those things is that it can really help to relieve anxiety and to develop a sense of curiosity rather than fear. And we're going to be talking about that in a little bit more depth today. So working with change rather than against it and uncertainty it can be very tricky, and this year 2020 has been a huge upheaval. On a global scale we have had a huge amount of uncertainty, a huge amount of change, and an awful lot to adjust to. And I'm sure most of us at times have found that almost overwhelming. And I personally have found mindfulness very, very helpful in helping me to kind of to cope with all those things, with the uncertainty about the future and coping with all the changes that have happened to us. And they happen quite quickly, which is obviously sometimes makes that more difficult to deal with. I mean, we tend to feel safer when we can predict things, but the problem with that is that life is rarely what we plan it. I doubt if anyone lives and plans their life completely and it happens like that. Life will throw all sorts of things at us, curveballs that we cannot possibly have predicted, and this year's pandemic being obviously one of those big ones. But really, one of the few certain things in life is change, and nothing really is permanent. Impermanence is a part of life, and it can obviously be very difficult to deal with impermanence because it can create a sense of loss, a sense of grief, when it's something that we want to hold on to. But I would say that impermanence can also be a positive thing. And I know that for myself, I struggled through quite a few years of illness, and I actually found thinking about impermanence quite helpful because I found that it gave me hope, and hope for recovery, and thinking that actually change could just be round the corner. Which is how it turned out in the end, which I'm eternally grateful for. So impermanence is part of life, and really the more we can accept that, the more in harmony we are with reality. So Pema Chodron, who is a mindfulness teacher, said that impermanence is a principle of harmony. When we don't struggle against it, we are in harmony with reality. And actually, mindfulness is all about being in harmony with reality, not fighting it, breathing with it and working with it. I don't know who said this, but someone said, thanks to impermanence, everything is possible. So actually, change can open up all sorts of possibilities for us, and which is what happened to me. And we also, as human beings, we have a huge capacity to adjust and to cope with change, which is often greater than we imagine it to be. And we can see this by the way that we can take things for granted in our lives. So we may have times when we're in acute physical pain, and we kind of get used to that, and when that pain goes, something like toothache, then we think, oh, well, I'm going to be grateful for this forever now. but actually we tend to then get back into the routine of not having pain, and we just get back into kind of a rhythm of what is reality. So we can have this huge capacity to adjust that is greater than we imagine it to be sometimes. The philosopher Alan Watts said that the only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it and join the dance, which is quite an evocative way of saying, kind of going with the flow really. And again, emphasising that the more we fight reality, the more we fight change, the more we kind of become tense and tight and actually tend to make things worse for ourselves. And this is something that we notice. The more uncertainty we face, the more uncertain we feel, the more things can feel out of our control and chaotic, and the more we tend to seek control and certainty, and we become rigid and closed in our thinking, and that actually contributes to our stress, adds another layer of struggle, because the world will not bend to our will. We cannot control what happens to us. So mindfulness is about acceptance of that reality, acceptance of the reality of change, of impermanence, and being more in harmony with that, which is quite a simple concept, but it's not easy, obviously, and it takes some practice. So be kind to yourself, would say is the most important part. So how can mindfulness help with uncertainty and coping with change? So mindfulness, a big part of mindfulness is that acceptance of reality, and that can include how we feel about things changing, because we may become, very stressed and struggle with that, and mindfulness is accepting those feelings as well. And we notice and appreciate more what we do have, the reality of the present moment, the positive things about the present moment. In essence, it kind of comes back to the serenity prayer, if you're familiar with that. And it goes, God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I can't change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So again, it's about accepting that we can't control everything that happens to us, but we have small spaces where we can control, and be aware of what's happening at the very least. And mindfulness, obviously, it can help to ground us, to bring us back to the present moment. So with times of uncertainty, we often worry about the future. And that's what uncertainty is, because we're not certain of what's going to happen next. And mindfulness can be really helpful in kind of breathing with that and being with that, sitting with those feelings of uncertainty, to bring us back to the present moment, to notice our breathing and what's happening in front of us, rather than something that is essentially just a thought at the moment. And that doesn't mean that we can't plan for the future and to get things in place for what might happen. But sometimes, a lot of times, we flip from planning into over planning and worrying. And that can actually get in the way of helping us. And mindfulness can bring about that sense of curiosity, which in some ways is like the opposite of fear. It's very difficult to be fearful when we're curious, because curious is like a sense of openness. By replacing fear of the unknown with curiosity, we open ourselves up to an infinite stream of possibility. So if we can begin to develop that sense of curiosity with mindfulness, it can be really helpful. So I wanted to talk a little bit also about what happens when things don't change and we want them to. Because sometimes we can feel very stuck as human beings. And again, acceptance can really help us in that situation. We're kind of letting go of struggling, letting go of the things that are not helpful to us, it actually leaves us more open to change, and things tend to flow more easily if we let go of those layers of struggle. And to let go doesn't mean to force anything or to push anything away. It means to let go in the sense means to let be with compassion, to let it be. Becoming more aware of what is keeping us stuck can actually put us in a more powerful position to change things if we need to. So mindfulness is just noticing what helps us and what doesn't really. And it can really help us to move forward if we do feel stuck, because it helps us to be aware of what's in our way. And a lot of the time we're in our own way, because we overthink things and we attach things to what happens to us, that can really be a barrier to us moving forwards in awareness. I'd like to read this quote from Alan Watts. I do read a lot of Alan Watts quotes because he talked a lot about mindfulness in a kind of philosophical sense. And he said, "But you cannot understand life and its mysteries as long as you try to grasp it. Indeed, you cannot grasp it. Just as you cannot walk off with a river in a bucket. If you try to capture running water in a bucket, it is clear that you do not understand it, and you will always be disappointed. For in the bucket the water does not run. To have running water, you must let go of it and let it run." So that was from a book called The Wisdom of Insecurity. And it's all about not trying to cling on to things, not trying to bend things to our will, as we talked about, and just to kind of let them happen as they're happening, accept the reality of what's happening, being in harmony with that reality and that flow, and that putting us in a powerful position to be able to change things if we can in the moment. So I thought that we'd try something different in terms of practice today. So I don't know whether you've heard of a kind of grounding technique, a mindfulness technique called 5-4-3-2-1. It's something that is used a lot for people who are in distress and feeling anxious, and it can really help to kind of bring us back to the present moment. And I hope that you enjoy it. So I think we'll start with just a brief breathing mindfulness breathing technique, and then we'll go into the practice. And this practice is actually best practiced whenever you can, not just when you're feeling anxious or distressed. The more you practice these things, the easier they get. That's simple as that, really. Okay, so I'm going to ask you just to close your eyes if you want to for a few moments. And gently bringing your awareness to your breathing. Bringing your awareness back to the present moment. Just being aware of whatever comes and goes from moment to moment. Accepting the reality of each given moment as best you can, as well as your feelings about each moment. And then when you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes once more. And I'd like you to start by noticing 5 things that you can see in your surroundings, in your immediate surroundings. Start by just noticing those 5 things. And then if you want to, you can actually name those things. You can list those 5 things that you can see in this moment. And if you want to, you can do that out loud. So for example, the 5 things that I noticed were a pink flamingo toy, not a real one. I noticed a hat. I noticed a plant. I noticed a bag and a cushion. And then I'd like you to bring your awareness to your sense of touch. And I'd like you to notice 4 things that you can feel or touch right now in this moment. And once again, you can take some time to name those out loud, to list them, or in your head if you prefer. 4 things that you can hear, that you can feel in this moment. So for example, I noticed the feeling of my feet on the floor. I noticed the feeling of the chair that I'm sitting on. I noticed the feeling of the air around my arms and my hands. And I noticed the feeling of my hands in my lap. And then I'd like you to bring your awareness to your sense of hearing. I'd like you to notice 3 things that you can hear in this moment without trying too hard. And once again, you can list or name those things out loud or in your head. Those 3 things that you can hear. So for example, I notice the sound of the clock ticking in my kitchen. I notice the sound of my own breathing. And I notice the sound of a car on the road outside. And now just bringing your awareness to your sense of smell. And this can be a little bit trickier to find two things that you can smell. You can notice the smell of the air around you, and you can pick up the nearest object to you and notice how that smells. Be curious and use your imagination. And you can list those two things in your head or out loud. So, for example, I can smell the remnants of the smell of my lunch earlier in the kitchen, the smell of cooking. And if I bring my hand up to my nose, I can smell the remnants of some hand cream from earlier in the day. And just finally bringing your awareness to your sense of taste. And if you have a drink or something to eat near you, you might like to taste those just to give you a kind of stronger sense of taste in this moment. Or you can just focus on the taste in your mouth in this moment. So I can taste a cough sweet that I had earlier, just the lingering taste of that, quite subtle. So that is the 5-4-3-2-1 mindfulness technique, and that is designed to bring you back to the present moment, to our tangible sense of the world through our senses. And as John Kabat-Zinn said, mindfulness is coming to your senses. So kind of waking up to the present moment and literally coming back to your senses to bring you back to the present moment. And that can be a really powerful and helpful way of helping us with feelings of uncertainty, feelings of struggling to cope with change in our lives. And these are really tangible things that we can focus on in the moment. So I hope that you enjoy practicing that with me. Keep practicing mindfulness in whatever way you can, and enjoy it, play with it, be curious if you can. Thank you once again for joining me today. I would encourage you to watch the other videos if you want to know more about the basics of mindfulness. There are some mindfulness in nature videos which you might enjoy, which is very much about coming back to your senses and noticing the world around us in nature and reconnecting with that. Please feel free to subscribe or comment on my videos, and don't forget to check out the Stuart Low Trust website, slt.org.uk. Thank you for joining me again today, and take care of yourself. Thanks very much.